Hey, so I think we've all been following Ather Energy's growth over the last 2 years, and I really wanted to test out Ather 450, which is their new flagship scooter. Not really new, but shout out to Damal, Niharika, and Akib for also suggesting that I test it out because I did, and I'm so glad. So this video is mostly for you guys, but for the other people out on the interwebs, just a quick jot down of the things I felt during my test drive. So here we go. That's an impersonation of the talk, but I'll get to that later. So to break the bike down, just to start off, it has an all aluminum chassis. It has a nifty space for storing your helmet, which is about the standard size, I guess, in any scooter, not too big, not too little. It has a nifty side stand as well. It has a dual disc brake and it has a wonderful display which is mounted where speedometer would usually lie. So that is mainly the breakdown of the bike. To get to my feel or the user experience while riding it itself, to break it down into low speeds, mid speeds, and high speeds. So at low speeds, the bike is great. After all, the very first thing that you're told as soon as you set foot into the Ather Center is that the bike is meant only for city-like conditions. So what that means is it's built and engineered to ride at low speeds, probably with multiple brakes, with multiple stops. It's not really built for high speeds, long distance, like what you would expect on a highway. It's primarily an urban bike, an urban scooter. So I loved low speeds really. Funnily enough, I liked it more than higher speeds that I went, mainly because of the bike's balance. So one thing that I think I forgot during the bike breakdown is the battery itself. So the battery lies in the floorboard of the bike. So that is where you would place your feet in a scooter, is where the battery lies. So because of the placement of the battery, along with how it's tied into the aluminum chassis, the balance of the bike is phenomenal. So what this means is even when you're traveling at probably 1 kilometer an hour, two, you see that the bike is so perfectly balanced that there's no need to even put your feet down. So I was really mighty impressed by this, and apart from that, I also like that when you travel at low speeds, you're able to accelerate in and out of certain situations to zip off. So it really was an enjoyable experience. Now to get to mid and high speeds, of course the bike performs admirably at high speeds. I love to pick up from what I was saying with low speeds. I love the torque of the bike. So officially, Ather says that the bike goes from 0 to 40 kilometers an hour in 3.9 seconds. To be honest, I think they were very conservative with this figure because I got a much better performance. I got about 2.9 to about 3.2 seconds is how fast I could go from 0 to 40. And as to run back to that original gag in the start of the video, the torque is phenomenal. It really gives you a jerk, and if you're not acquainted with the bike, it would really jump at you, and the bike would shoot off. So that's all fine, but how does it actually figure in a real life environment? So I tested it in the wonderful city of Bengaluru, and of course I did the most Bengaluruian thing ever, which is get stuck in traffic. Wonderful, right? Yes, lovely indeed. So I did get stuck in traffic, and how did the bike perform? So as I mentioned, low speeds is okay. So I was riding along behind a huge bus, and at low speeds, I did notice this one thing, which is a slight hum that comes at a very low speeds when the motor is just kicking in. The executive at Ather explained to me that this is because of the DC motor, which is connected to the wheel with a belt. So it's because of this transmission that there's a slight hum, but I feel that it's because of a cooling fan. I'm not so sure, but this is what the information that was presented to me. So we can choose to go by that or not. I'll probably keep you guys updated on that. But coming back, at low speeds the bike was okay, but and the balance was wonderful. But let's go back to the scenario. So I was behind this huge bus, and the bus suddenly stopped in the middle of the road for no apparent reason. and I had to move around it. So I had to jump lanes, not proud of it. But how the whole bike played out and what the strengths of the bikes were, I was able to zip out of this lane and into the other because of the torque at a very high speed. I was able to maintain balance while taking that sharp curve, and ergonomically I think the bike worked great. It really did its job of being of performing in a city. You were able to zip between corners, probably at signals. I don't recommend that you jump lanes a lot, but if you plan to do so, this bike is great. You don't need to hold a clutch or drop a gear. You just accelerate and zoom, you're out of there. So in terms of that, I think it handled great in an urban environment. So up next, I guess I'm just going to talk about a couple of features that I think are super interesting from the Ather 450. So number one, going back to the screen. So the screen that's present in front is called the dashboard, of course, and there are a couple of things that I really love about it. So firstly, it's the navigation. Of all of us, especially, I see this mostly with delivery executives for Swiggy and Uber, etc. They need to mount a phone holder or something similar to get from point A to point B. And even most of us, probably 99% of us, use Google Maps. So why not just integrate it? So welcome feature there. The navigation work great. You can enter point A to point B. Very simple, very familiar, no problems whatsoever. However, one thing that I did notice is that the screen doesn't give you an arrow mark uh, to where you are. By that, I mean if you are present at a particular location, you don't know if you're going front or back or left or right, north, south, east or west. So in terms of positioning, maybe the I guess the UI could improve a little bit, but it worked flawlessly. GPS spot on, absolutely no problems whatsoever. It has a data SIM card already inbuilt, which means you have constant internet connectivity. Perfect there. Next, application. So you get an Ather application with your phone, which you can install it. Sorry, with your bike, which you can install on your phone. And what the application does is it keeps track of everything that's happening on the bike in terms of what is the charge left, if your bike is functioning as it should, etc. So whatever sorry you see on your bike is transmitted and displayed to your phone, because the bike is always connected to the cloud. Every time it runs diagnostics, it updates it to your phone. Perfect. Thank you, IoT, right? Uh, Up next, the BMS, the battery management system. So some fun stats, I guess, about the battery. I get that the charging time is about 0 to 80, 80 minutes. Sorry, 0 to 80 takes about 1 hour. So that's 0 to 80% of charge takes about 1 hour, and full charge takes about 2 hours or a little bit in excess of 2 hours. So I think that's okay. And for now, though, I see a number of challenges with this part of it because, as you know, Ather has a very limited grid. So I see about probably 20 charging points within the city of Bangalore only. Of course, they have plans to grow this network, to grow this grid to a much larger to a much larger, I guess, grid where they have points next to you. Apart from that, they also encourage their customers to install points, charging points, which I guess is called the point. It looks like an Iron Man chest plate, and it's pretty cool. But they also encourage customers to install it in locations so other people can charge. Uh, yeah, I guess that should do for the BMS. Next up, OTA updates. So as you know, they are still in the developmental phase of things. So there are a number of updates to the firmware that are coming in. But as I mentioned prior, it's always connected to the cloud. So OTA updates, no problem. It's going to come. Your bike's going to be upgraded to the latest firmware at all times. So the screen itself is a capacitive screen. It's about 8 inches roughly. But what that means is if you are somebody who wears gloves while riding your bike, it won't necessarily recognize your fingers. So either you need to buy the special gloves which have the ability for it to be recognized on a capacitive touchscreen, or you need to take off your gloves every time. I know this is a very minor, I guess, hiccup, but it's also quite annoying. So I was wearing gloves and I had to take it off every time I needed to navigate, and that was a bit annoying for me. So that's that. So that's with the screen. It's very very informative, and I guess it's also designed in a very nice way. I would encourage you to take a look at it if you choose to do the test ride yourself. Next up, suspension. So I was told a lot about the suspension by the product executive at Ather, and I was told that there's a main shock behind and a fork in the front, which looked quite standard. But however, while riding, I found the ride to be very stiff and rigid. The front suspension works okay. Thanks to the glorious roads of Bangalore, again, I found I had a really good test bed to test it on with potholes, with large potholes, small potholes, a whole variety of potholes, ditches, nalas, I don't know, the works. So the good news is it was not really the worst experience I've ever had. I guess that's the silver lining. But the bad news is, I guess it was quite rigid. Like I could feel when I would go into the pothole, I would feel the bike slamming in at first. And when I communicated this back to the product executive at Ather, I was informed that this was a weight issue. So, as with all suspension, the more you load it, the more it performs better. So, me being me, I didn't present a huge challenge in terms of the weight factor. But if you are on the heavier side, I guess this is your silver lining. This is where you shine. Because I guess with a heavier weight, the suspension performs better. I didn't have a chance to test this out, but this is the information that was provided to me. Uh, Up next, what else can you access on your dashboard? You can toggle between an economy mode and a regular mode. So, what is the difference? So, the economy mode allows you to travel up to 75 kilometers on a single charge, 0 to 100%. The standard mode allows you to travel 60 kilometers on a full charge, 0 to 100%. So, what is the difference between the economy mode and the standard mode? One thing that I noticed is that the top speed is now capped. I didn't get the exact top speed, but I think it's around the economy mode top speed is around 60 kilometers per hour, whereas the normal mode top speed is 80 kilometers per hour. So as I said, if you're riding in the city in an urban environment, I don't really see any of us riding at 80 kilometers per hour. Uh, so I guess that's a welcome feature. Apart from that, I also saw that the torque is slightly reduced in the economy mode. Again, it's not really too noticeable in our everyday riding environment. I don't think we are going to experience a big difference here, but it's just something to put out there. So I guess most of us could just use economy all day, every day, and not have a problem with it. So that's that. Right. Next up is a reverse mode. So this was quite cool. So Ather has understood the parking dilemma that we have. So the bike weighs approximately 108 kilograms, and because of that, it's not the most handiest to pull out or carry. So what they've in fact added is the ability to reverse out of your parking location. So you could park inside a narrow place and still be able to pull out the bike without any problem. So I think that's quite cool. Next up, the brakes. So the brakes, the front brake I found is quite I guess docile, and it was I guess a bit soft in terms of how it was operating, but the back brake was very punchy. It really like grabbed onto the back wheel to the point where I almost skid. So both brakes together are quite lethal when used together. But what I did, or after about 30 minutes of test riding, I developed a strategy where the front brake I would use when I'm in traffic and making small stops, and the back brake or using both brakes together is only at high speed. So again, maybe they could work on how they balance the brakes out, or maybe this would improve with wear and tear of the brakes itself, which happens in a lot of cases. But for now, I saw that I guess it's a bit imbalanced with how we go about things. Of course, you can go around it with how you use your brakes, but again, it's just something to put out there. Up next, yeah, so the next big question: how do I charge my bike, or how do I know that there's a charging station in case my bike runs out of juice? So, for now, what Ather is doing is they're giving each person who purchases Ather 450 a charging point to put at home, of course, or at your office. So, this is a full fledged charging grid point that connects to the grid. And again, it's always connected via internet, and it takes, I guess, I'm not sure the exact voltage, but you can connect it to your house and charge your bike every day or and in other places. So Ather is also partnering with local cafes, with bars, and places where people would want to hang out to integrate their charging points there. So why is the question, right? Why can't they just set up a standard charging grid where every couple of kilometers you would have a definite charging station? So the answer to that, which was again provided to me, was because the Ather is looking at places where people would want to hang out and not necessarily have to look for a charging grid. So, for example, you would all have your favorite watering holes and your favorite places where you go to on almost a weekly or a daily basis. And Ather wants you to have the experience of going into a place which is familiar and fun to you, having your bike on charge and coming out without having to wait for a period of 1 hour or 2 hours for your bike to charge. Now, I completely understand this, and I think it's a cool way of thinking. But right now, as you know, the grid is very limited. It's still quite small, so I would still be quite concerned if I would have to wait at a public charging point for a bike to charge, because unlike a fuel powered bike, the charging period is between an hour to 2 hours, which is unlike, which I guess we are not used to it since we operate petrol bikes, where it's 15 seconds to to top up your tank. So again, these are challenges that Ather is looking at overcoming. Logistics is a huge part of what they're doing next. But for now, I would say use the charging point at your house every day before you leave, or when you know that your bike's low on juice. That should really help circumvent the entire issue with your bike running out of juice. So keep tabs on your Ather app, so you know if your bike's out of juice. Uh, Up next, what happens if something goes wrong with my bike? How do I know if there's something wrong with my Ather 450? Now, as I mentioned, your dashboard runs diagnostics constantly. So it tells you even if a component's out, so even if a light blows out, it will notify you of that. And for now, Ather offers a complete, I guess, warranty on the battery. So the battery is slated for 3 years, after which Ather will swap it out with no extra charge to you. Uh, and apart from that, also they have doorstep service. So the cool thing is they will come to you and you don't need to push your bike to the nearest Ather, I guess, warranty or replacement center. So that's good. They're firming up their door service portfolio. So that's great. Up next is they have what's called an early, I guess, an early adopter subscription. I'm not sure if they call that exactly, but if for now how they work is the charging is going to be free. It's going to be you connect to any point and it's completely free of charge. However, in the future, this is going to be a chargeable method. So I think what I was told was as of October 2019, every charge which you make in your Ather scooter is going to be charged to your account. And yeah, what I was also told is that how Ather is planning to increase adoption is to have what's called an early adopter subscription, where you pay a subscription for a particular period of time and you avail all Ather services. So I guess that's quite an interesting method of getting more people to sign up, and this being removed as a hurdle for early adopters. So anyway, I guess that's a complete lowdown of the bike and what I felt. But just to recap, I guess just to give you a small brief about what I loved and didn't like so much. So what I loved in the bike, as I told you, is the balance, is how the bike is engineered. If you look at the chassis, if you look at the battery pack, if you look at the weight distribution of the bike, you can see very clearly that these guys know what they're doing. They know how to engineer a good bike, and it really came through in the ride. It was really nice, and I really loved this, especially in low speed environments like an urbanscape. Up next, I loved the torque of the bike, as I said. So you push the accelerator and it jumps at you and you will be taken by surprise. And of course, this is a huge advantage in cities. But I just love the feel of it. It really gets you. It really exhilarates you. Up next is uh, the whole idea. I don't know if this is a tangible, I guess, plus point, but I really loved the design. So, right from the point when you step into the showroom till the point where you leave with your Ather 450, I guess, hopefully, is you have a standard clean experience. So, these guys really know what they're doing. So right from the dashboard, right from the bike, the clean lines on the bike itself, the minimal branding, the whole idea behind product first, or knowing why they are building this bike, the problems they are overcoming, it really comes through that they have understood what are the challenges that the customer is facing, and you build the bike for the customers. So I really loved the amount of research that went into thinking about what are the challenges, or starting with the problems rather than starting with the solution. I think that was a great initiative by them, and you don't see that very often with automobile manufacturers. So I loved that entire idea of how they went about developing the product and the product itself. So, what I didn't like so much, as I mentioned, there's this hum that comes at low speeds. So, I'm not sure what exactly that is. There were a bit of conflicting reports from the executives themselves. But I guess you can get used to it. It's just a little tick that I had. Next up is the rigid suspension. As I said, this is something that I felt throughout. I also did a bit of research online and saw that other people experienced it as well. But I guess if you're riding with a pillion, you should be fine. And next, yeah, the charging network. So right now it's still in its nascent stages, as we know. They're still growing the grid. They're still looking at logistics, where they've come in a span of maybe 6 months in terms of the grid and logistics is great, it's wonderful. But I still think there's a long way to go in terms of how they set up this grid. At the end of the day, remember, it's called Ather Energy. So I'm sure that they have expansion plans. It's not going to stop at a scooter, but it's going to be a full-fledged energy company. I'm quite convinced of this myself. But as I said, at the moment, I think it's still in its nascent stages. So who is this bike meant for? I mean, absolutely, it's meant for people who love technology, who really do, I guess, also environmentally conscious people, and also people who are really into, I guess, being able to track everything on your smartphone using IoT. I guess it's meant mostly for people like that, but primarily their main target audience, at least at the moment, is early adopters. So right now, if you think that you are somebody who is an early adopter, who's willing to take a chance on technology, who's willing to, I guess, also put their bet in for the environment, absolutely this bike is for you. Now, how reliable is the company? Are we sure that this bike is going to be serviced for many years to come, etc.? So as you know, Ather is now, I guess, Ather has got a huge boost from Hero Motors. So that's a huge, I guess, investment in the company. So that is going to see the company through, apart from all the other interests that it's speaking. So you should be quite safe in that department. So I guess if you check these three boxes that I mentioned, and you think that this bike is a bike for you, there's another small challenge. So I was told that in Bangalore, the waiting period as of January 5th, 2019, the best possible scenario where you can get a bike is August 2019, and the worst possible scenario is October 2019. The reason for this is that they have one assembly plant in Whitefield, Bangalore, and they're not able to keep up with the orders. The production is still, again, these are the common challenges of a smaller company that's suddenly expanding to a larger company. So as of now, their production capacity is quite limited because they purpose build their motors, they purpose build their chassis and everything in-house in Bangalore. So made in India, I guess that's another branch of people that this bike would appeal to. But as of now, it looks like there's a long waiting list, and at a price tag of almost 1,40,000, it's quite an investment. But I guess this is the bike for people who want to identify with the brand, with the ideology, with the design thinking. Absolutely, if you're an early adopter, I would say go completely, go bonkers, get this bike today. So that's my quick, not so quick actually, review of Ather 450. I love to talk, don't I? uh, completely, I guess I was quite blown away by the experience. I love that something which is so different is coming into the market. I love how it's challenging other dominant players to stand up and take notice. And I also like how the public is reacting to this new concept and how accepting we are of it. So power to you guys, and yeah, I think you guys should test drive it, and you will know. So that is it for me. Job done. I'm not sure if I'll be buying one anytime soon because of how congested the place, the part of the city that I live is in. But definitely, it's something that's going to be on my mind, and I'm going to think about it, sleep over it for a couple of days, and probably I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So until then, peace.